hopefully we're live, and hopefully you guys can hear me. Please do let me know in the chat if you can hear me or not. And I'm doing things a little bit different, mostly out of necessity, because I don't know if YouTube changed it or if I did something wrong, but I had to get set up and go through OBS, which I'm not used to doing, so we'll see. Okay, cool. You can't hear me. Excellent. Now, is there an easy way for me to mute myself in case I have to cough? Because I'm getting over being sick. Hopefully you guys aren't getting that headphone static every time I have to move my mic, because I'm getting it on my end, and that's not great. So, hey guys, yeah, so, let's see. It's been busy lately. I went to Superstars writing seminars, had a great time, and then I got sick from going there, got some con crud, which turned out to be COVID, and I'm trying to recover with and deal with some of that. So I will try to limit the coughing and stuff. I think I know how to mute it if I need to. Like, hopefully you didn't have to hear that. So, all right, we got a number of people already. So today's talk, I'm not going to be as high energy. Not that I'm super high energy. A little less focused too. But anyway, it's really good to see you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I've gotten a number of requests to talk about learning curves, like how and when to introduce your magic in your story. I don't feel as good about the stuff I've got here as I usually do coming into one of these, but I'm going to talk through what I have with you guys so far. Feel free to add comments and questions, and then we'll do questions at the end. It may end up being a longer question session than usual, and we might end up doing less than an hour. I don't know. So when it comes to introducing your magic in your story, I think we're probably already familiar with the issues and potential pitfalls of not managing this appropriately. Mainly, if we don't give enough information, it can be easy for our readers to end up feeling confused and overwhelmed by both the world and the magic system. And in some cases, it'll feel, if you don't have enough information, things can feel really forced, is a big part of the problem. Also, on the flip side, if you give too much information all at once, it's very easy to cross over from narrative into info dumping, or other things that might not be as great storytelling wise. I really hope you guys don't have to hear that. And also, another thing to consider when it comes to this is when you give the information. If we give the information too late, that's when we run. If we give the information too late, that's when we tend to run into problems of it feeling like Deus Ex Machina, and we're just pulling solutions out of nowhere. Because I've talked about this before, when it comes to using magic to solve problems, a lot of it comes down to foreshadowing. So if you don't foreshadow early enough, it's going to feel like you just pulled it out of nowhere last second because you couldn't think of another way to do that. And we don't want to do that, especially when it's something that you did spend time on and put together deliberately. Now, if you give the information too early, too much of the information too early, you can ruin some of the twists. And this, again, is not unique to magic systems. That's just generally how it works when you're providing info and details about your world, your characters, or anything really in your stories. And when some of this is off, it can disrupt your story pacing and your narrative flow just because you're interrupting things to deliver information about your magic. Or at any point in this conversation, you can pretty much take when I say magic system and replace it with world building, lore, religion, or even backstory, any of that, and it all kind of works the same. So, in order to manage this well, something I think is important, I think it's important to think about the difference between character knowledge, author knowledge, and reader knowledge. Because that's really what it all comes down to. And if any of you have played a lot of tabletop RPGs, you probably come across the concept of player knowledge versus character knowledge. Because when you're playing D&D or any tabletop or whatever, especially if you're an experienced player, sometimes you'll go into situations where you will see signs in the environment or a monster will behave a certain way. And as the player, you already know what its weaknesses are, what it's resistant to, and how it's going to behave. But your character likely doesn't. And that, not everybody has to, not that you have to play tabletop RPGs this way, but that's where some of the role-playing comes in, is being able to understand the difference between player knowledge and character knowledge, and then do your role-playing based off of your character knowledge. It's very similar in our stories. There's what we know as the author. There's what our characters know in the story. And then there's what the readers know as they're reading the story. And I wanted to talk about this because this applies way beyond just magic systems. Especially with beginning writers, a lot of times they will have explanations for why things happen or bits about the backstory. And when you get a beta read back and somebody says they're confused, they aren't asking you, the author, in that one-on-one conversation to then tell them why it's okay. That means that you didn't provide enough information in the story for the reader to have enough knowledge for it to make sense. So there was a gap between the author knowledge and the reader knowledge because you didn't provide enough of the information. And the difference between character knowledge and reader knowledge can vary, especially with world building stuff, because the characters grew up in this world most of the time, unless you're doing Portal Fantasy or something like that. But a lot of times they grew up in the world and they know the things the readers don't. When you're looking specifically at the magic systems, if you are dealing with a character who's completely new to the magic, then character knowledge and reader knowledge are usually going to be the same or close to the same. So with that, this concept of learning curves and information introduction actually applies on all levels except the author level, because you need to know it before you can really put it in your book. But for your character and your reader, they both have learning curves and they don't have to be the same. Like I said, simplest scenario is that your characters are learning everything for the first time, just like your readers are, and it allows you to manage some of that. So I see a comment that I'm getting an echo. Are you guys still getting the echo? I do have a little bit of a latency delay with how I have OBS set up. But let me know if you're still hearing the echo. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it in the live stream, but I'll definitely watch for it when I edit some of this for the full video release. Okay, you are still getting an echo. I wonder if it's because of how close I am to the walls. I don't have like an amazing YouTube studio setup or anything like that. Hopefully it's not too distracting. Very slight. Okay. Then I'm not going to troubleshoot it right now. We'll kind of push ahead. Thank you guys for bearing with that kind of stuff. That's the first thing I wanted to bring up was like I said, character knowledge, reader knowledge, and author knowledge. So once you understand what those are, the next step, as with most things, you guys have heard me talk about this a lot, but anytime you want to manage something, one of the first steps is to plan it, figure out what you want to do and what you want to deliver. So, what kind of learning curve or immersion experience do you want to deliver to your characters and to your reader? You can, uh, we're writers. The right writer can make I should say it this way, anything can be made to work by the right writer. There's no one writer who can make absolutely anything work. But among us all collectively as a whole, there's no rule that can't be broken by somebody and have them break it well in a way that actually works. With that said, you can have some very steep learning curves where you don't really explain anything. And the best example of that is Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson, and I can never remember the name of the full series, but it gives next to no information it gives no information about how the magic works. He just starts using terms. The characters are just using magic, and you have to figure out as you go, or just accept it and go on for the ride. And that one's odd to me because all of the characters and stuff are immersed in it, at least as far as I got. I really need to pick it up again. That learning curve was very off-putting to me when I first picked up that book. And that's one of the things that you need to be aware of, is that might be off-putting to some people. But Gardens of the Moon has very little in the way of actual information it provides. One series that I absolutely love called Mother of Learning, is a progression fantasy meets Groundhog Day, and it's really, really good. It has a lot of borderline info dump information. I didn't notice it because I eat that stuff up. I love learning about the details of the system and the details of the world, but I got a friend of mine to read it who is not as into magic systems and fantasy. And talking with her, I finally realized, oh yeah, there's huge sections that are just explaining how things work. And if you're not interested in that, that's a lot. Now, like I was saying, if you go into those extremes, and you can go in the other direction, and you can have it be a very slow burn where you're gradually introducing a piece at a time. And if you go to the extremes, you're going to lose some readers. But let's face it, that's going to be true no matter what you do. Like every decision we make, there's going to be some people that don't want that, which is still a hard truth for me to deal with because I want to make everybody happy, and I want to do everything perfectly so that there's nothing to criticize, and that's not realistic. Yes, the Malazan series, that's what it is. But just be aware, especially if you go to extremes, there are going to be some people who will not like it. Now, the gradual curves are usually the most evenly spaced and the easiest to digest. And that's where they're beneficial, is you're drip feeding things as you go, allowing you to introduce what you need just a little bit before you need it, and pacing things out. People are never overwhelmed. At this, okay, I think I managed to hold that in long enough to mute. So, I am feeling much better. Like, this cough is really all I have left. And it's only issue when I'm talking a lot. So here we are. All right. Uh, what was I talking about? Gradual learning curves. Um, they let you introduce what you need when you need them. One of the benefits is when you do it right, it can lead to the readers like always wanting that next piece. It can really build kind of anticipation, or if you want to look at it this way, it's a sort of an addiction. They got the need for that next piece of information. If it's too slow, people might feel like you're stringing them along and you're not giving them everything they need, right? That goes back to too little information, the too little information problem. With the steep learning curves, there are some benefits to those because when you do that, it does make the world and the system feel more complicated and more immersive and more rich right from the get-go. And now that I'm thinking about that, there's a weird thing to play with there about how fast you're introducing information and just how much information you're actually explicitly introducing. Because that rich and immersive, you definitely get that rich and immersive feel when it becomes clear that you aren't being told about everything there is. So if you're dealing with a story and a thing comes on screen and we learn about the thing, and then another thing comes on screen and we learn about thing B, we're just seeing a piece at a time. It's another if there's all kinds of stuff coming at us, we see this, we see that, but we only explore what is immediately necessary. What's coming to mind for me on that is actually Altered Carbon, the first season. First season is so good. There's a lot of stuff there that is kind of just like it's almost set dressing, but not because of how well they do everything else. When I watch it, I assume that there is a reason and a thing for everything that is in there. So when we see cool bits that get little tiny bits of focus, I I feel like there's just a lot more that has been developed to this world than has been communicated. Um, so yeah, I don't know why I didn't think of this when I was planning, but the steepness of a learning curve can come from two things: how quickly you're dumping information in, and how much information there is to learn. Which, if you dump in too much too quickly, info dumping, and that is generally a problem for your narrative. That so we've talked about figuring out if you want gradual, like the benefits of gradual learning curve. There's a steep learning curve, and there's something I couldn't think of a good name for, and I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this, but best term I have is a delayed learning curve, and that's where you learn how things work after they have been done. And I was trying to think if I've seen this where that's the extent of the learning curve, where everything is coming immediately after. The closest I can think of is if you had some, it's like Supernatural, the show Supernatural, or um, maybe some mysteries might be where you could do that. But it seemed like something that was missing in just talking about shallow, delayed, and steep. So I wanted to mention it. And uh, it's odd. This has to be managed carefully based on the type of story and experience you want to deliver, because it can easily feel like you're running into plot holes and solving them a minute after, instead of you doing this deliberately. And to make this one work, I think it has to be tied very closely so that the character knowledge matches the reader knowledge. But then maybe not. That's just what appeared to me at first blush as I was digging into some of this, was just thinking something happens and they have to research and they discover what happened after the fact. So those are a couple of those are the main types of learning curves that I saw as I thought about it, dug into it a little bit. Um, no, fine if I need a breather. Oh, that doesn't jive very well with my mentality, Lucas. Um, I am not great at taking breaks. It is something I have been trying to improve on over the years, and I have gotten a bit better. But especially when I'm trying to give information to you guys, I I put a lot of pressure on myself to just give you the best that I can, as condensed and polished as I can. And today is definitely not that. So those are the main types of experiences I see. Um, are like the shallow, the steep, the gradual, and the delayed. So there are some options for you to look at, and pick the one that you want. Once you know which method you kind of want to use, let's talk about how you actually go about providing the information in a way that works. So there's a number of ways that we can actually teach our readers and, to a certain extent, our characters about the magic and the world. It looks okay. Going to take a quick look at some of these. Yeah, somebody mentioned that matching reader knowledge and character knowledge is a tightrope. That's that. Yes, there will be a uh, I don't know how to pronounce it, Latotl. You will be able to access this live stream for a bit afterwards. I've been taking them down from public access about a month after, because that's usually when I start working on converting it to the full video. So it'll be up for a little bit. Um, yeah, the biggest cause for info dumping is that we spend time on things and we think they're cool and we want to share them or we want to show them off. And there's nothing wrong with that. No, well, I shouldn't say nobody. Most people are not going to care as much about all of the details as you will. And just because we created something doesn't mean we need to share something. I'm just going to skip the ads there. It's trying to run ads on you guys. But so when you're looking at what information to provide, consider whether it's actually needed or whether you just think it's cool. You can add things just because you think it's cool or because it adds to the atmosphere, but because it's cool can easily shift over into too much. It's very easy to deliver too much because you think it's cool. So bear that in mind as you're assessing what information you're giving out when. But let's jump back to the delivery methods. How is it we can teach the readers about the magic or the world? So for the most part, they're either going to be learning the magic alongside the characters, or the characters will be providing it to the reader in some kind of context or fashion. An example of that is like first-person narration, where there will be sort of asides as the character is basically explaining it, and that's your narrative way of explaining it. You see that a lot in things like Dresden Files, where Dresden explains to the reader how things work because Dresden is telling the story. And there, brain. Or providing extra details about what these different pieces mean in context of the world as a whole. So they learned this bit about the magic can do X. And then from the character, we learn why that's important or why that's bad, why that's a problem. And that's sort of what that can provide. When we're learning it alongside the character, the learning arc has matched up for a moment, if not permanently. It has matched up for a moment. So as someone is being taught or discovering information because they lack it, we are learning it right along with them. And I think I'm probably kind of belaboring this too much. Um, but something to watch, uh, something to watch for with learning it with them is you don't necessarily want to make your characters ignorant of everything unless that's part of the point, like it's a Portal fantasy or something like that. Your characters can know things. That's why I wanted to talk about learning it from the character. So, going back to Mother of Learning, there's a number of things that Zorian knows about how the world works, and we just kind of get the context as he's thinking about things and as he's problem solving. Uh, it they didn't just even though he was a student, they didn't make him just oblivious to everything so that we could learn absolutely everything alongside him. And somebody did point out that Dresden does get information wrong sometimes, which is true. That's part of the thing of learning from characters is they might be unreliable, and that's actually something when we're dealing with our magic systems in general. You can change your magic system partway through a book or even through a series or even between series because maybe the way people understood it was wrong. And it's not that necessarily anybody was lying or anything like that, just what they understood about how it worked was different. So, learning alongside the characters, learning from the characters, we have a number of different actual delivery methods that we can use to actually hand off this information. I'm going to get caught up on the chat here. Yeah, Lucas, delayed is definitely useful from time to time. That's part of why I wanted to talk about it. Is the delayed curve. I just don't know that can be the only part of the curve. As I'm talking it through, I'm wondering if that delay information drop is more of a technique than an actual consistent progression, but it's definitely useful at certain times. Okay, so question answer dialogue between characters, mentor figure. Okay, yeah. So yeah, this gets into some of the delivery methods. Cora is already talking about some of the ones that I wanted to cover. One of the most straightforward ones is if the character is legitimately being taught the magic by a mentor in a class from a book. Doesn't matter. They're being taught in the scene itself, and we get to see them doing the learning, and we get to learn right along with them. Cora already mentioned this. Cora B already mentioned this, that it can be done in dialogue and conversation where people are discussing how and why something works. If you're going to do it through dialogue, pay close attention to why the dialogue is happening. Because trying to teach through dialogue, it is very easy to slip into, I think it comes from stage acting, but there's a term I learned a while back that's called maid and butler dialogue, also known as you know dialogue. And you catch that anytime two characters are speaking to each other and they say, as you know, Bob, or as you know, Janet. If both characters already know, why are they telling each other again? Now, there are different ways that you can subvert that and deal with that. Is somebody could start saying, be like, oh, I learned this today, and somebody can interrupt and be like, yeah, you told me about this 2 days ago, but what's interesting is that I learned X. And you can make it into something more natural. But having the dialogue that and to deliver information that both characters already know, and they both know that each other already know, that's pointless in terms of story. And that's a foible that you want to avoid. So Just pay attention to that when you're looking at delivering information via dialogue and conversation. There needs to be a reason. One person knows, the other person doesn't. They're trying to confirm what they know. Maybe they already talked and somebody forgot, and they're revealing new information. A lot of reasons the dialogue, like dialogue in general, you want to have a reason for it to be happening, but especially with information, details, you want to have a clear reason in your mind as to why it is being discussed in the conversation. Another method you can have is to take advantage of like direct experiences and experimentation. So learning is very hands-on and can involve a lot of dialogue. Side dialogue and conversation is one thing. Direct experience is the character goes and tries something, and based on what happens, they learn about the magic. That is harder with complicated things, but that is one of the tools that you have, is having them try something and experimenting with it and seeing what happens based on what they tried. And this ties closely into the next one. I view puzzles, problem solving, and mysteries in general as a whole, their whole own vehicle, their whole own technique for delivering information. Because there's a question that needs to be answered or something that needs to be solved, so characters have to go research, discuss, and experiment in order to find what works. And in the process of doing that, you can learn things that aren't necessarily related to the solution. You learn the solution, obviously, assuming they find the solution and aren't forced to move on to a different direction. But puzzles, mysteries, and problem solving are wonderful to help you deal with some of this. And I talked about this a bit with the dialogue already, but whichever of these methods you're using, we want to make sure that there is a reason that method is in the story. Just throwing in a random side puzzle just for them to solve it, that happens in life, sure, because life is messy and chaotic and complicated, but usually we want our stories to be a more curated, streamlined experience. So if they just find a puzzle box randomly, and they spend a bunch of time learning how to unlock the puzzle box with magic, and then the puzzle box just has a piece of candy in it, and they eat the piece of candy and move on, depending on how much time you spent on it, that could be very frustrating from the reader perspective. And it will then feel very forced. It's like, oh, you threw in this bit about the puzzle candy box just so that I could learn this nuance of how they use it. It's one of those things. It's not inherently a problem if the readers see some of our tricks. The problem is if the readers see our tricks on how we're doing things and it doesn't really add anything. Is really what we want to watch out for. All right. Gonna get caught up on the cotton skin. We got a lot of people here today. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming into this one. It's probably, I'm assuming it's because of the topic matter, but we've got almost like twice as many people as usual, which is amazing. Okay, so the dilemma is not falling into the trap of deceiving the readers. You can deceive the readers, Cora. Deceiving the readers isn't itself an issue. It's a fine the thing there about deceiving the readers and withholding information from the readers, which one of the next things I want to talk about is when to reveal what. You don't ever want your readers to feel like you are playing them. You don't want it to feel personal. I still haven't found a great way to explain this to people who haven't felt it, but if you have read a lot of mysteries, I'm sure you have encountered some where you get to the very end and the twist that comes out of nowhere and doesn't really make a ton of sense and feels like it was there just to say, haha, we fooled you, you didn't guess it. Okay, actually I do have a couple of examples. That's kind of what happened with Lost. Is there were a lot of theories about what was going on, and I didn't make it through all of Lost, but I didn't make it through all of Lost, but for a while I was very interested in a lot of the theories, and I know what they decided on wasn't as interesting as a lot of the theories. And it seems like that's because the writers didn't want people to, they wanted to deliver something that the readers hadn't guessed before, or that the viewers hadn't guessed in advance. And that led to a situation where it felt like they were stretching and reaching just to make up something that hadn't been guessed. It's okay if people see things in advance, that's not a problem. So, Lost is an example of that. I had another one on the tip of my brain for a second. Um, nope, it's gone. um, but any of that standard, some M. Night Shyamalan stuff, for example, The Village. The Village, man. There were a lot of problems with that movie, one of them being that they advertised it as a horror movie. And then, um, about like a third of the way through, I learned that it's not the horror movie that I came to the movie theater to watch. And that felt like a haha, we fooled you type of thing. And I was upset. I actually walked out of the movie theater and didn't see the rest of that movie for a long time. Then I found out that there was an even bigger twist at the end that made even less sense, and there was no real purpose for it other than, which the twist, by the way, it's in like this Pioneer Days village, and there's supposed to be monsters that are patrolling and attracted to red that keeps everybody terrified. Well, the monsters were fake. And then, sorry, major spoilers, but I don't feel bad about this at all. Monsters were fake. They were used by the elders to control the villagers. And then the village is actually in modern day, just set in the wilderness somewhere. And the blind chick goes on her adventure and then just stumbles into our society. Like, no, none of us saw that twist coming because that's absolutely insane based on what we had seen prior to that twist happening. So it's turned into a bit of a rant, but that is the real issue I see with deceiving readers. It's not giving them wrong information. It's doing it in such a way that they feel like you tricked them. Or in one book I read, Murder Mystery, there were a number of people with motive and opportunity, and at the very end, it was somebody who faked their own death years ago, before the book even started, and a character kind of pieced it together, and he wanted revenge on this person for very vague reasons that didn't seem super solid. And the main character pieced it together based on a vibe from what he had seen of another person. It felt very cobbled together and was just like, you just really wanted to come up with something that I didn't guess. And congratulations, you got me. It's not a good feeling. Now, it being a thing like in Dresden where he's going through of like, this is how it works, and then something happens. It's like, oh crap, this is not how it works, and I need to figure out how to survive because I prepared for one thing and I'm now dealing with another. That is interesting and that is fun. Whole tangent there. Um, let's see. Okay. Thank you so much, Snovia and Lionel for being here. Well, Snovia, I don't know if you're still here, but thank you. I appreciate it. Um, yeah, absolutely, Kit. It's about not playing fair. Like that's a good way to put it. Is if it feels like a twist came about out of foul play. Mm, not here for that. Um, so let's actually talk about when to reveal what, right? Because that all kind of ties in. Uh, you don't want to do the delayed or the post reveal for something that is supposed to be a major twist, unless the twist is what the heck just happened. Everything has changed and we don't understand what we're dealing with. If that's the vibe, that can be okay. Um, so like with the village, that could have worked if that was like led into some other stuff that was important for a lot of reasons, and they had done a better job foreshadowing it. They did not. It was just something that came out of nowhere. Not fair play. We didn't have it. We had no chance to guess what was coming. So, for the most part, you want to reveal information before it's used. Like I said, with the exception of the delayed learning. Now, if the information is being used as part of a solution, it absolutely needs to be revealed early. We talked about this in the videos on plot problems. If it's going to be solving a plot problem, we need to know about it in advance. Just full stop, period. On the other side, though, if the information is part of a problem, then it can be explored after the fact without causing problems or upset for the reader. So, kind of what I was talking about, where I think the characters think they're going into situation A, they learn that what they understood about things is wrong, and it's actually situation B. That's a big problem, but that's not the end of it, because they now have to deal with this switch on them, and that is then interesting. So, and we've been talking about twists here and there. So that's the main thing, I think, is ask yourself if it's solving a problem or causing a problem. If it's causing a problem, you don't necessarily have to introduce it in advance. If it's solving a problem, you definitely want to do that a little bit in advance. Now, twists are tricky. They're their whole own thing that I'm not sure I necessarily feel qualified to give anybody advice on how to do them right. I can just tell, I can talk to the ones that I think have worked and where I think they haven't worked. The biggest thing I think is the foul play is if it's something that suddenly makes a bunch of tiny things click into place, it's a good twist. Also, if you don't want to, twists are weird because you don't want to give the information too early. You want a lot of it to be provided early, little bits and pieces, but then that last piece is something you want discovered like shortly before the twist takes place. Ideally, the best thing you can do is if you have really good beta readers and they make a comment saying like, oh my God, is this what's going to happen? Like a paragraph before it actually happens. That's a sweet spot because you lined it up so that your readers got to the conclusion just a second before it happened, and that makes them feel super smart. It makes me feel super smart when I figure it out just before it happens because I solved the puzzle before somebody told me the solution. And I didn't solve it like at the beginning of the book before I was told the solution. I solved it like right at the last second, and that's a good feeling. That's really hard to manage, which is why twists are so tricky. And Shyamalan gets a lot of guff for a number of things, but he did do another movie that I thought had a really solid twist, and it's a decent horror movie, and it's called The Visit. I'll let you guys put some stuff in the comments to see if you want me to spoil it and explain the twist. And I will announce spoilers so you guys can like plug your ears and stuff. But yeah, let's see who wants to hear the twist about The Visit, because that one was good. I really enjoyed that one. So once you know how it relates to being a solution or causing a problem, or whether you want it as part of a twist, then it's really the best thing you can do is focus in on what is relevant at hand, relevant to the situation at hand. Are your characters training or preparing for a big battle? Well, then delivering information about how magic affects targets, how magic reserves work, how magic counters other magic, all of those things make sense for the characters to be dealing with and learning, and for it to be dropped for the readers to deal with. Even in the combat, all of that still applies. Now, if you're trying to pull off if your characters are trying to pull off a con job, then getting into nuances of how the different magic looks, feels, and generates noises and sensation what it takes to cast it, how quickly they can cast it, how subtly they can cast it. Though that's all relevant information there. Um, and a lot of this, there's gonna be overlap on all of this. Let me see if I can think of a better example between a con and a battle. Um, Crafting. You're crafting an item, right? And you're dealing with spell formulas and interactions of runes and stuff like that. That's not that's a lot of that information won't be relevant in a battle scene unless you decide to make it relevant based on how the character works. That's why I'm having a hard time. Is exceptions can exist for everything. Because if you have a character who's an enchanter, which uh, the sufficiently advanced magic, um, I think that's the first one. I think it's Andrew Rowe. I read the first book or two um, of the series, and it was quite good. Main character is an enchanter, and that's his only magical ability. So that's a thing where it bleeds over because his enchanting knowledge is relevant all the time because he does modifications of his enchantments and enchanted items on the fly in combat to deal with deal with what he can. So that's a situation where, because of that, the nuance of the enchanting magic is always relevant to him. But some of the nuances of the battle magic, not so much. It's not relevant to him as a person. There are a couple spots where it becomes relevant, but that's really what you want to focus on is why does it matter to this situation right now? And if it doesn't, can you make a situation where it's relevant? If you have information you need to deliver, see if you can modify one of your scenes to make it more relevant. Um, so yeah, and I said I didn't know if I was going to have enough to talk about, and here I've been going for over 45 minutes. And granted, some of that has been pausing and coughing and a slow start, but um, we're going to do the Q&A next. I've already got a couple questions in here, so feel free to drop in more questions you guys have. And I'm going to take a drink of water, and then we'll talk about the visit. So, and I should double check, make sure that was in fact Shyamalan. Yes, it was. Okay, because that would be embarrassing if I told you the wrong movie or the wrong director. Um, but in the visit, it is a horror story where two kids meet their grandparents that they've never met because their mother was estranged from her parents. And there's a bunch of stuff that is subtly off. Their grandparents aren't well. Um, the uh, the grandpa is a little weird and has a bit of an episode where he ends up kind of attacking somebody. The grandma is really not well and has, I think it's like sundowning is what they called it, where at night her brain goes completely off and behaves very strangely. So through the entire movie, they are behaving very odd, and it seems like there's a lot of mental illness and stuff, some stuff that is very uncomfortable. Um, and then the twist. So they've been talking with their mom via webcam, but gunk got on the webcam, so their mom hasn't been able to see them. But they finally get it cleaned off, and the daughter points the camera out and says, "Yeah, there they are." And their mom says, "Those aren't your grandparents." And it's such a good twist because it puts a whole bunch of small things they put into place into perspective. Because these two people are actually patients at a mental hospital where um, their grandparents worked and like volunteered, and they were so excited about their grandkids visiting that they were talking about it with all the people. And then these two patients basically broke out, came to their house, killed their grandparents, and took their place so that they could have that experience of having their grandkids be there. And then it shifts from like a subtly unnerving thing to an imminent danger thing. Like that one was good. I really liked that one. So, um, with all of that, that is an example of the twist where cast a new light on everything, and a whole bunch of these weird things started making sense. Because of course the grandparents were acting off. They were off. um, so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and jump to some of the questions. I had one from Roland a little while. So, have you noticed a significant difference for urban fantasy, especially when the world is like our real life, but with magic from different cultures popping up here and there? Yes. So this is something I've been, excuse me, this is something I've been dealing with on my own book that I'm working on right now, because I'm I'm in kind of a writers group with a number of other people, and a lot of them are urban fantasy, paranormal romance people, and there's a lot less to explain with urban fantasy because there's a lot that is founded on our world. It makes the introduction smoother because there's less information for you to wrangle. When you're dealing with fantasy or sci-fi or something that is a whole new secondary world, it becomes you can't explain everything. And that's where you have to be very judicious about what you're covering, where, and when. But yeah, urban fantasy has a bit of a shortcut. Um, and if any of you have ever tried to write shorter fiction, like flash fiction, which is, I think, 1,000 words or less, or microfiction, where you're looking at like 100 words or less, the shorter your prose, the shorter it gets. The more you have to rely on preconceived notions and concepts that you are hoping and relying on your readers to already know and understand. You have to, because you don't have enough words or space to teach them everything you need. It's kind of like that. Urban fantasy and some of the contemporary stuff, um, and a lot of horror, right? The majority of the world is what we expect. So then it's just the small pieces we have to learn, and it's much easier to drip those as we need them in something like a werewolf movie or The Quiet Place is a little different because the world has fundamentally changed, but zombie outbreaks, right? Because the world starts normal and then rapidly shifts, and we have to learn about it with our characters. That's where the character knowledge and reader and audience knowledge is in tandem. Um, with the exception of like Walking Dead and 28 Days Later, where that's kind of a delayed shift, and I'm getting too much into the nuance. But yes, there's definitely a difference between urban fantasy and sci-fi fantasy. Basically, there's not as much information for you to worry about, and that's not a good or bad thing. I don't want anybody to think that that is a slight on urban fantasy. Some people will try and say that, like, oh, it's not as creative. That's nonsense. But there is a lot more pre there's a bit more knowledge the readers already have that you can lean on with urban fantasy than you can with full secondary world stories. Okay. Any other questions? And Roland, if that didn't answer your question, feel free to do a follow up question. All right. Lionel, I have a work in progress where something even the master is teaching the magic to the main character is considered practically impossible to happen. Yeah, that's fine. Um, spoilers. Uh, and Coffee, yeah, that's part of what was so great about The Visit is I thought it was going to be a horror movie, and then it was just unsettling, and I was waiting for the grandparents to snap, and then I learned they had already snapped, and it was really good. um, okay, so my dilemma is that the magic is based on theoretical physics, but trying to explain it so the reader doesn't need a degree in physics to understand it. Um, that is hard. Your best thing there, Cora, I think, is going to be practice with other people, or with beta readers, or with other people, figuring out how to present it to the layman and present it as concisely as possible, and really digging into exactly what you need. And that may be that you say things like, look, there's a whole bunch of underlying theory about why this works, but what we really need to know for right now is that A plus B causes C. You don't need to know why A and B are a thing. You don't need to know why their interactions cause C. What is important right now is that A plus B equals C. You may need to take more of that approach, depending on the type of story you're telling. Um, but yes, like when you're getting into some very technical stuff, that also gets difficult is figuring out what to teach and what not to. And you want to focus on the stuff that you're making up, for sure. Because if it's real theoretical physics, you can plop out theorems and concepts and stuff that the characters know. And if the readers really want to know, they can go look it up. But you have to make sure you're providing the information that they can't get any other way. That is very important. Um, all right. Question from Vivra. My story is about a teacher who has a dark secret. Another teacher is slowly finding out about that secret. I just don't know how long to keep it running. As long as other stuff is happening, it's fine. Um, it's if that is your main hook and your main draw forward, and you just keep stringing it along, it's going to get tiresome. There's no set law on like, oh, do it X number of times before it gets annoying. That's something that's going to kind of be a feel. But the more focused the story is on it, um, the more likely it is to string that along. I'm trying to think of some examples. Um, I feel character dramas are really, really guilty of this, especially when they try and pull in some supernatural elements. American Horror Story, the season with the witches, I think it was season 3. There was some stuff like that for me, where it felt they were just stringing me along, and it was supposed to be the main thing. Um, is they wanted to find the next, I think it was the Prime. I don't remember what it was called, but they wanted to find the next person of their household who was going to be the main matriarch and leader. And they just kind of kept stringing it along, and a bunch of other stuff kept coming in and getting in the way. And this other stuff, some of it was important, some of it was interesting, and some of it was just kind of some random things. It's like, we're going to go explore some of these things with this character. There's this big question over here I would rather have you answering instead. Um, that's kind of what you need to pay attention to, of like, how long can you keep it running? The other thing you can do is you can have different versions of the truth and different versions and different layers of the secret. So it's one thing to find out that the teacher was involved in a student death. Um, and then it's another thing to dig in more and find out that the teacher caused the student death. And then you dig into it more, and then you find out that the teacher planned, premeditated, and executed the student death. Like, those are each significant discoveries. So that might be something you can do, is see if you can break your secret down into layers or milestones or different forms of severity, and then you can keep having some minor reveals that change how it works, understanding that they're going to be small things as you go. But I hope that helps. Okay. Oh, Lionel? No, I don't think that is deceiving the reader at all. Them saying it's next to impossible and them either fixating it or focusing on how to do it. There are people that do that. They're like, what? You say this is impossible? Screw you. I'm going to find a way to do it. There's also a phenomenon in human psychology. For decades, we thought that a 4-minute mile was impossible. And then somebody did it. And then immediately somebody else did it. And then somebody else did it. As soon as we could conceive of it as possible, as soon as we saw that it was possible, people started doing it. So I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I have not read Dragon's Egg. by Robert Forward. Sorry. Oh, right. That was your recommendation for Cora. So, yeah, those are some good examples there. Um, there's some good sci-fi that can also help you with that, Cora. But a lot of them get kind of info dumpy, so it's a fine line to walk. Let's see. Oh yeah, Lucas, if you are writing in a style where you can do footnotes, that can definitely be a thing. Or a glossary or ancillary material. Like in the movie Starship Troopers, which is based on a book, and I regrettably have still not read the book. But it starts off with people clicking through a bunch of videos and information articles, and it always ends with, "Would you like to know more?" Like, you can do that kind of stuff. That sort of epistolary addition. That's that's what Sanderson has been doing a lot. That's what he's done in the Mistborn books. There's a lot of these like small entries at the beginning of each chapter that are little bits of information that then slowly come together to teach us more. Or in the Alloy of Law series, or like the Wax and Wayne saga, it's a lot of just extra flavor and information about the world. Like the Gentleman Jack stuff doesn't have any, like, it doesn't really have anything to do with what's going on, but it's great because the Gentleman Jack stories are over the top, ridiculous pulp fiction, and then later in the series, you get to read the annotated versions where his steward or his scribe or whatever is doing a bunch of very dry satirical commenting about Jack's exploits and Jack's comments. So they even talk about how in the world there's two different types of readers. There's people who like the Gentleman Jack stories as they're published, and ones that like the annotated versions by his scribe. Those don't really add a ton, but to like the plot itself. But they're a lot of fun, and they add world information into it. Um, but again, fine line. The main reason that works is he has big chunky books with very thick chapters, um, so it kind of works out. The Supreme, that's what it was. The witches were trying to find the Supreme, uh, and they got me going. I thought they knew what they were doing, and then I finished that season. And it was like, oh, you guys are kind of just making it up as you go along. Uh, Again, not knocking it to anybody. Like, that's something I find where there's a focus on character dramas. They did a very good job with the character drama. Not as great, like, weaving the magic into it. Um, okay. Jormungandr. Good name. How do I introduce a reader to the reasoning for a weapon being special to the character in the world without dumping information on the reader? Information is common knowledge in the setting. Bits and pieces. Bits and pieces. Uh, Little tiny bits of lore. Like, you can have some stuff. If it's common in knowledge, you might not even get to do full paragraphs for a bit. Like, it may come out, somebody hands them the weapon, and the main character is like, "Oh my God, is that this thing from this hero?" And they're like, "Yes, yes, it is." And then later they're going off and doing something, and somebody's like, "Oh, that's the sword. Does it actually do this thing?" And they say, "Yes, it does." Or they're in a battle, and somebody's like, "Hey, use this ability that you have the sword of legend. Use its whatever ability." And um, I don't feel I'm answering that very well. That's a hard one. Bits and pieces, bits of lore, some side conversation, just small chunks. Um, and if you have a character who wouldn't know it, that's obviously the easiest way, whether they're an outsider from the world or from the nation, or however you want to do it. Um, okay. All right. So I I think that is it. I don't see any more questions. We've gone a little bit over. Um, thank you, everybody, for showing up. And yeah, I don't have much else. I'm on the mend. Things might. I've been trying to get back to my once every 2 week schedule by chunking things and breaking them out. That might have to slow down again. Um, I'm gonna keep doing what I can. Uh, keep sending me questions. If you guys go to any of my recent videos, I have been putting links to the suggestion and question box. So if you have a topic that you want me to cover, please drop it in there. Also, if you go to my website, it's I am one other thing that I would like is for you guys to join my newsletter. I will drop a link in the description of this live stream once we're done. If you just kind of go around and navigate crronson.com for a little while, you should get a pop-up for it. But yeah, on my newsletter, you're going to be getting advance notice of different things. I'm going to be starting shifting so that advanced access to videos and everything is done through my newsletter. Special deals. If you just want to hear more about me, and not gossip isn't the right word, but just what's going on in my life or whatever. I talk about gaming, mental health, writing, all that kind of stuff. And I would love to have you on my newsletter. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to head out. I'm going to get something to drink and something more to drink, some tea. But whatever you guys do, please make sure that you keep writing and you stay awesome. All right. Bye, everybody.